Welcome to Wrapped Up Wednesdays.
Woo! What is going on, YouTube? It is your boy Diego, but you can call me Chancho, and welcome back to another episode of Wrapped Up. This is episode 2, and I'm here sitting, chilling, wrapped up with my co-host Ashley. You may recognize her from episode 1 and all my other stuff. Welcome.
Hi everyone. It's good to be back. We're excited. I'm excited.
Let's get right into it. So we are really glad to see some, if you guys are back, we're glad to see some familiar faces. And if you're new here, welcome to the channel. This is our true crime show that we like calling Wrapped Up. This is the only true crime show on the internet that the title not only describes the cases that we go over, but it also describes the hosts who are wrapped up in our favorite blankets. And we have our snacks, and we invite you guys to do the same. So today we have chosen to get Coke Zeros, and this is for you ASMR fans out there. And we also chose to go with gummy bears and chamoy. If
It's
you
the
know,
best.
you know. So you take your gummy bears. Do not use Haribos because
No.
those kind of stink for this. So they're too hard, right?
Yeah. There's this brand at HEB called, I think it's called Great Value, and it's a green bag.
Great Value's Walmart.
Then what's it
Hill
called?
Country.
I'm so
Oh
sorry,
my gosh.
HEB.
I am
It's called
disrespected.
Hill Country, and it's a green bag with like somewhat of like a rainbow banner.
Rainbow? Isn't it like a wagon? Anyways,
Whatever
So-
the case may be, these are the best gummies ever. And all you do is you put chamoy with some trechas or whatever you got to sprinkle and enjoy.
before we get into the story, we'd like to mention that we are not sponsored. I don't want to get sued. I just really like Coke Zero.
Right, because not only on this channel do we roll our R's, but we love Coke Zero and gummies with chamoy.
So, as we promised last week, we're going to be going over the story of Owen Hart today. But before we get into that, we want to thank you so much for listening, or for those of you guys that saw episode 1, thank you guys for tuning in. This is a new series that we're taking a delve on and we're really excited about. And we couldn't have done it without our editor, Micah. He's only 1 year old, but we had him working really hard up until 3 a.m. on a weekday, mind you, to finish that last editing. So every single Wednesday, we're here for you guys. Wrap yourselves up with your blankets, and
Bring your favorite snacks, favorite
Exactly.
blankie, and let's get started.
all right, guys. Well, let's get down to the nitty-gritty.
Oh, schnapps.
We're gonna go ahead and take a deep dive into the tragic tale of Owen Hart. You guys are in for a wild ride for this one.
Now, viewer discretion advised, we are talking about murder in a way. Now, there is no mention of any type of abuse, whether it's substance or domestic, but we are going to be talking about a murder.
Tragic death. It's not a murder, but in a way,
In a way,
the
it is.
in a way the WWF murdered him. But we're
Yes.
gonna go right into that. So
So again, if this isn't for you, check
you guys
out
can
our
check out
other
our
videos.
videos. Okay, so chapter 1, the nitty-gritty. Who was this Owen Hart? Well, Owen James Hart was born on May 7th, 1965 in Calgary, Alberta. So yes, Ashley, we do have another Canadian.
All right now.
He was born as Stu and Helen Hart, and he was the youngest out of, get this, 12. So he had a huge family.
What were they doing?
I don't know, man. I mean, so Owen Hart married his high school sweetheart, Martha. She plays a big role later on in this episode. In 1989, and together they had 2 children, Oj, Edward Hart, and Athena Christie Hart.
Which, by the way, she was born on my birthday.
Wow, you guys are besties then?
Yeah.
Okay. So Owen was raised into a wrestling family. Obviously, that Hart last name you probably recognize from episode 1. If you haven't seen it, check it out. They lived and breathed wrestling. Owen's father, Stu, was the co-founder of Stampede Wrestling, which again, episode 1.
If you remember.
And they had a wrestling gym that they called the Dungeon. If you remember from our last video, Stu trained a lot of well-known wrestlers in the WWE, WWF, all that other good stuff at the Dungeon, including Chris Benoit, episode 1 plug. On the list of trainees were such family members like Brett and Owen Hart. Now, you're probably wondering, because a lot of these people maybe they're prodigies, or maybe they're born to do something. Did Owen Hart know from a really early age that he was supposed to be a wrestler? No. So it's true.
shocking.
I know, right? Especially coming from that family.
Right. You would think they're
It's
like, oh, I'm going to be the next best
Coke
thing.
Zero Zip. So Martha would state that Owen would try to find a lot of jobs that weren't related to wrestling. He did start wrestling when he was in high school, and he knew that he had potential. He would continue his career wrestling for the university. After graduation, Owen began to wrestle in London under the stage name of Bronco, because here we roll our R's. And he didn't get any recognition from that. Like, he didn't make it large, if you know what I'm saying. And he decided it was time to go work at his dad's gym, The Dungeon. While he was working for his dad, Stu, he also began training on the side. And shortly after, and here we go, like a lot of these wrestlers in these times, they take the path of wrestling in Japan. So there he goes.
It's like a thing. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to go to Japan.
Again, episode 1 plug. So Owen found a lot of success when he was wrestling in Japan. And because his dad had a lot of connections with the WWF, Owen would then sign with the company in 1988, and he was 23 at this time.
Can you imagine being 23 and like being a professional wrestler?
Yeah.
Like, what were y'all doing at 23?
Golden Corral. So at the time, Owen's older brother, Bret Hart, he was already, you may know that name, Bret Hart. He was really famous in the WWF. And then the WWF didn't want Owen to just be simply known as his younger brother. So they decided to give him, a superhero persona. Coke Zero's acting.
Acting a fool.
So Owen was well known for his high-flying style, so this was working really well for him. I mean, it only makes sense to make him a superhero.
Yeah.
They started calling him the Blue Blazer.
The Blue Blazer.
And he went on to make his debut at a pay-per-view event called the Survivor Series. Owen then started gaining more recognition at the WWF, but he decided to leave after 1 year. From 1989 to 1991, he would travel to different places around the world and gain a lot of experience. And while he was traveling and wrestling, he would still sometimes stick to his Blue Blazer persona. Mm-hmm. Then from 1991 to 1999, Owen returned to the WWF for the second time. And this time it would be different than the last, because he would quickly move up the ladder, and he was well known for being really technical. So like, he was like a really good wrestler, like really good technically. So Owen would team up with his brother-in-law, Jim Neidhart?
Honestly, when I was researching, I was like, I don't know how you say his name.
So he teamed up with his brother-in-law, Jim Neidhart, and they created the New Foundation. And this tag team was short-lived because Jim left the WWF.
I wonder why.
I
didn't look into it.
So Owen would also create another tag team with Coco B.
First of all, let's just say that's a weird name.
Oh, Coco Beware. That's clever.
That's clever, but
Okay.
it's also like, who's going to go by the name Coco?
So Owen began his solo career, and he was benched for 2 months due to a knee injury. And in the fall of 1993, Owen was, again, we talked about this in episode 1, the WWF, WWE, they make up storylines to like keep the story going, so there's rivalries and stuff like that. So they put him
always entertained.
Exactly. Like this, it's got to be entertaining. So they set him up in a sibling rivalry against Bret, and the storyline was focused on Owen being jealous of his brother's success. I don't know what to do with my hands. And they were so committed to the storyline that even when they were outside the ring, they never even took photos together, because they were like, look, we're playing this up on stage. We got to make it believable outside of the stage.
First of all, can I just say that's like commitment. Because you imagine like Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthday parties, graduations, and like you can't even like celebrate with your family, your brother, because you're like, oh, I wonder what the outside world is going to think.
We're in a feud. And if we get seen together, it's going to ruin the illusion. So Owen and Bret had an explosive WrestleMania 10 match which would result in Bret winning. And this would only fuel the fire, and both men would face off in a steel match. Oh, steel cage. Cage match. Bone saw.
I got you for
3 minutes. 3 minutes of playtime. So in 1994, in 1994, Owen would go on to become one of the top villains in the league. The league.
Well, I mean,
The
yeah,
Federation,
the league.
I guess. I don't know. So fans and coworkers would claim that Owen would excel in his villain role, and because of his like skills in the ring.
Yeah, and then a lot of people said he had really good promos because of like the persona, and he had like all these like a flexibility gymnastic moves. So people said that he like thrived at this villain role. So that's pretty cool.
So people that were close to Owen would go on to say that he wasn't really happy with the direction that the WWF was taking, or WWE. They're interchangeable, whatever. So the WWE tried to create a storyline that had Owen involved in an affair with his on-air valet, Deborah. But, and we love a committed king.
Yes, we stan him.
So he was committed to his wife, Martha. And he was like, oh, I'm not about to show or not show. I'll pretend to have a feud with my brother out of the ring.
Right.
But I refuse to pretend to have an affair.
Right. Like, we crossed the line at the vows I made for my wife.
Right.
Before God. And you know what? I really appreciate that.
You gotta respect it.
You gotta respect it, because I feel like there's a lot of wrestlers that are like, oh, well, I know my heart. My wife knows my heart. It's okay. But it's like, no, man, because the people that don't know that wrestling is fake are like, oh my gosh, he's cheating on his wife, and that's not the case.
It also says that he, my God, he also didn't want it to affect his children. Like, imagine your kids are watching you fighting, and then they're like, wait a second, why is my dad
have his arm around
like kissing
Chelsea.
this other woman or whatever? No, his
like,
sorry, the lady's name was Deborah.
Deborah.
So
Pardon.
okay, the WWE would then decide that they would bring back Owen's blue blazer persona.
You know what it sounds like? Blue blazer black.
Yeah, from Friends.
Friends.
Why would he want his blue blazer black?
You said blue blazer black. Anyways, I'm sorry.
So at this time, they decided to take on a new role, or like a new direction for Owen, and it was essentially he was going to be parodying or like making fun of the famous wrestlers of the time. So
From
he would
the
make
WCW, right?
Oh, sorry, the WCW. So he would make parodies of like Hulk Hogan's lines like "Eat your vitamins," and Sting's entrance where he would descend from the ceiling. And you guys don't know it yet, but this thing of like making fun of Sting's descent from the top would be what ultimately would lead to Owen's untimely death.
This just got interesting.
Yes. So that's going to go ahead and bring us into Chapter 2, which will be led by Ashley.
Me. Chapter 2, The Accident. On May 23rd, 1999, there was a pay-per-view called Over the Edge in Kansas City, where the WWE had decided that Owen Hart would go up against The Godfather. Owen Hart was supposed to win the match.
Yeah, which is crazy to think, because it's like, it just brings you back to reality that like the WWE/WWF, they're like scripted and it's just entertainment. And that just like reminds me of like how the referees, whenever they were like, oh my God, what's going on over there? And then the match would be going on behind them and the crowd would be like, turn around. And they would just like completely miss like somebody like sneaking a chair onto the stage or whatever.
Right.
And then because the referee was turned around, they didn't see that the person had snuck a chair onto and then they would like turn back around and be like, oh my gosh, what happened or whatever.
Or like the worst part is like, going off what you said, if like let's say your best friend came into the match and tried to distract you, and the referee was like, go back.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, you're more concerned about the guy who's trying to distract you than what's going on in the match.
Right.
Like, okay.
Meanwhile,
all right.
the guy had a sledgehammer.
Yeah, it's like,
and the referee's like, go back.
and then they would turn around
here.
and then he's like, oh, I didn't see it.
What happened? Meanwhile, the guy is like,
It's just like blood squirting out.
and then at that moment is when the guy like obviously does a counter, and the referee is already like, what?
Yeah, he's.
Dude.
So it's all entertainment.
So again, reports had claimed that after this whole pay-per-view live match at the Over the Edge, Owen was set to then retire months later, because that's basically what happened. He was going to retire and he was going to buy his dream home with his family and his wife in the outskirts of Calgary. And the reason why we wanted to point this out to you guys is because Owen had already made plans after this event. Man was set. He's like, I'm gonna buy a house outside of Calgary and go with my family. And unfortunately, that never happens. Let's continue, guys. Owen Hart was scheduled to have a dramatic entrance that involved him descending from the rafters using a harness and grapple line. So, if you guys can remember from Chapter 2 with Diego, he stated
Chapter 1.
I'm so sorry. Chapter 1. He stated that Sting had a similar entrance where he would fall or like descend from the ceiling. So basically, the WWF, WWE wanted to make fun of WCW. And so they were like, well, what can we do to make fun of them? Oh, I know. Let's make fun of Sting's entrance, but this time we'll have Owen Hart, the Blue Blazer, come out and make his descending from the rafters funnier. Wild stuff. The WWE wanted to have this entrance run super smoothly, so because of this, they decided to use a quick release mechanism that would save 2 seconds.
2 seconds.
1, 2. 2 seconds of Owen releasing himself. Guys, 2 seconds. Keep this in mind. Owen had stated since the beginning that he was apprehensive about doing this entrance. He even mentioned to a fellow wrestler in the locker room that he was mega nervous. And this wrestler, alongside other wrestlers, stated that the whole event was off-putting to them because Owen Hart never in his career had ever been nervous.
Yeah, he was not the type of person to start feeling nervous, but there was something off about that night. He was acting a little sus.
Very sus, right? And Owen had practiced this stunt previously in another event called Sunday Night Heat. However, he did take quite a while to release himself, or I guess unhook himself from descending from the rafters, and this did not appease WWE.
It didn't look too smooth to them. They were like, this looks kind of janky. It's not up to our standards. That's not the WWE standard.
Basically, there's pictures of him.
They just didn't like it.
Yeah.
It looked clunky to them.
Right, and because the mechanism that they were using, which Diego's gonna post up right now, basically he had to like get his finger, unhook it, and then like unclip it, and it just took too long.
It took too long for their taste.
So they wanted to invest in a different quick release mechanism that would...
Well, you say invest, but they cheaped out. It wasn't really an investment.
Sorry, my bad. They cheaply invested in a 2-second quick release mechanism that Diego, again, will get into in Chapter 3. So, picture it, guys. The arena has been darkened. I am so sorry. The arena has been darkened. The music is slowly setting in. The fog, remember, because they always had fog in the entrance. The fog was getting released. Owen Hart is up in the catwalk. Now, again, if you guys have never seen a catwalk, they're so narrow. Okay, so if you've seen the White Chicks, the scene where they're at the runway and the two main mean girls are in the catwalk and they're gonna dump the paint on the poses.
Yeah, but picture that like 5 times or 7 times higher than that.
Higher and a little bit narrow, but you get the idea, guys. You get the idea. So with the arena darkened, music setting, fog blasting, Owen was in the catwalk and he was getting ready for his big cue, right? Because he was about to make his big descent, basically, right? Owen's wife, Martha, claims that this is what possibly could have happened. She believes that while Owen was waiting for his cue in the catwalk, he was more than likely fixing his cape, maybe doing a little jingle jangle on the harness, because guys, picture it, you're falling from a couple of feet on a cable wire. That has got to be uncomfortable. So Martha believes that he probably was getting, comfortable fixing his cape, and while doing this, he probably triggered the clip to unclasp. Without him knowing, guys, without him knowing. So when Owen was finally given the cue to descend, he then descends as one does, and he realizes in that moment that nothing is holding him. He's just basically free falling, and honestly, that has got to be the scariest feeling in the entire world. Reports say that he descended about 78 feet to his death, but
I mean, some people say 78 feet, other people say like 90. It depends on like the source you're looking at. But I mean, long story short, he fell about 8 stories in total. So, I mean, that must have been the scariest few seconds of his life. And yeah, I mean, he fell to his death.
8 stories.
8 stories. In front of everybody at a pay-per-view event.
That's gonna be a no for me. But yeah, basically that's what happened. Owen descended, according to this report that we read, 78 feet to his death, equivalent to 8 stories. Yikes. Owen hits his chest on the top rope and bounces from the top rope and then falls on his back on the ring. EMT immediately rushes to Owen's aid, and that is when the live cameras pan out to the audience members. Because remember, this is a live pay-per-view match. I can't even just imagine like what the audience members that were in attendance were like witnessing when they saw a bunch of EMTs rushing to Owen's aid. Meanwhile, the people at home viewing the pay-per-view were like, "What's happening? Why am I seeing audience members?" And this caused Jim Ross, if y'all remember.
Yeah, Jim Ross was that. I mean, Jim Ross and Jerry the King Lawler at this time were the commentators. I don't know who the commentators are right now. But yeah, they were hosting this event, and I mean, yeah, they just didn't know what was happening.
Right, and like, can you guys imagine being a commentator? Something tragic is happening, and you're told like, "Hey, you still have to like comment what's happening, but like make it lively and pretend that something tragic is not happening."
Yeah.
That is the worst job ever. At this time, this is where Jim is basically saying like, "Hey guys, like this is not scripted, this is real, something tragic has happened, but please stay tuned, we'll update you guys." In the meantime, EMT rush over to Owen's aid after the fall, and they put him in a gurney and they remove him from the stage. Viewers at home are probably thinking like, is anybody gonna give us an update? Like, why am I seeing Patricia out in the corner? Like, I want to see who's in the ring. But they were not about to just show live events to people at home. Like, it was bad enough that people in the audience were witnessing this. Jim Ross stated that Jerry the King Lawler, his fellow co-worker, left him by himself to go check up on Owen Hart and kind of just get an update, because at this point nobody was telling them anything. Like, they literally had no idea what was going on. Jim Ross immediately knew that something bad had happened because he saw Jerry's face. And while all of this was happening, the pay-per-view match continued to resume.
Yeah, they weren't gonna stop the show. The show has to keep going, I guess, even though somebody's dying in front of everybody as they're watching, and they're just like, so the show must go on, I guess.
Right, like, what makes anybody think that, oh, I know somebody possibly might be dying, but the show must go on?
Yeah.
At that point, it's kind of like, no, like, forget everything. Bye. This whole thing is canceled. This is a tragic event. Let's all go home.
Mm-hmm.
But no, they were like, no, the show must go on. And honestly, that's so messed up. And then, of course, reports claim that audience members in the actual arena had to endure the blood-stained mat and ring because of Owen's tragic death. So that's just insane. With the live pay-per-view still streaming, might I add, Jim Ross saw again Jerry's pale face and realized the severity of this accident. EMT tried to revive Owen multiple times while transporting him to the hospital, where Owen severed his aorta, which filled his lungs with blood. Owen would die from internal bleeding caused by blunt force trauma. Reports would also state that Owen was dead within just minutes of the fall. He was only 34 years old with his life ahead of him and had already made plans after this event, if y'all can remember. And then get this, guys. Only 15 minutes after he falls.
Just 15 minutes.
15 minutes after he falls, Vince McMahon makes the executive decision to be like, hey, the show must go on. And 5 matches after he falls resumes. Guys, come on now. The main event that night was Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Undertaker. Do you want to just tell them the importance?
I mean, yeah, like at that time, I guess Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Undertaker were like the top of the top wrestlers, I guess. And this is just a not skeptical, but we're just assuming that the reason they continued the show was because they were like, well, we're not going to cancel our top 2 wrestlers fighting. No. I don't care if somebody just died. We're going to continue this. Another thing.
Okay.
Just how like the times change. Like, this is 1999.
Like sensitivity?
Yeah, like nowadays, like if somebody like breaks a leg or like breaks an arm or like something like that, like they completely cancel the event. And this is like 100 times worse. No, 1,000,000,000 times worse. Somebody just died on the stage. 15 minutes later, they're like, Vince McMahon makes a decision. He's like, all right, back to the show. Whatever. Stone Cold Steve Austin
versus The Undertaker.
Yeah.
And like the crazy part is that, well, we can assume the reason he didn't want to cancel the event was because he would have had to refund everyone in attendance their money back. And from what we can gather, it was a sold out event.
Mm-hmm.
Because guys, it was a pay-per-view live streaming match. Typically pay-per-view matches are always sold out.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know how much the tickets were back then. They probably weren't as expensive now, but probably still was a pretty penny. And I don't think Vince McMahon wanted to refund people their money, so he was just like, whatever, man, like the show must go on. People are here to see Undertaker versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. I don't think they care that anything else happens, which that's so wrong in so many levels, but all right. During the broadcast, Jim Ross was given a 10 seconds notice to announce Owen's death to the audience members while the later matches were going on. And then, Diego, would you like to read basically what Jim Ross had to say to the viewers at home?
Yes, I will put aside my gummy bears in my mouth, on my cheeks.
The show must go on, Diego.
I have the unfortunate responsibility to let everyone know that Owen Hart has died. Owen Hart has tragically died from that accident here tonight. And it's also important to note that at this time, the people who were there at the event in person, they didn't hear this announcement. This announcement was broadcasted to the people that were watching on TV.
So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, like, did the audience members have to piece the puzzles themselves, or did they find out like at the 5 o'clock news the next day?
I don't know, man. They probably figured out what happened just because, he was hauled off and he fell from so high. They probably figured out, but...
Right, because from what you're saying,
all we know
that Jim Ross said was only for the viewers.
Right, all we know is that they didn't hear the announcement. They probably had pieced it together by now. And some fans did leave the arena because they thought it was messed up.
That's right.
So I figure even though they didn't hear the announcement, they probably figured out what happened. Right. And they were just like, some people were upset enough to be like, why are you continuing this? Like, let's get out of here, while some others stayed behind. So. And
I'm assuming it's the audience members that were like around the like front and center, right? Mm-hmm. What is that thing called? Ringside. There you go.
Really? Is that what it is? I like courtside from basketball.
Right.
So.
Well, I could assume that the ones that were ringside who were privy of seeing exactly what happened, I'm assuming they were the ones that dipped and were like, this is not for me. This is very inconsiderate. I'm out. I would hope so. An investigation was able to conclude that a very subtle movement, like Martha had said, had caused Owen to trigger the quick release on his harness, unfortunately. And then I thought that this was interesting, and we wanted to add this to our story, that Dave Meltzer, a journalist who wrote in his Wrestling Observer newsletter, he wrote this, guys, check this out. Nobody killed Owen Hart. He died due to an idea derived from the lowest form of pettiness and an accident, which in some form was due to negligence and bad judgment, possibly on many people's parts. So that way we can get into chapter 3.
Yeah, this chapter 3 is going to be about negligence, which was used in that quote. So, yeah.
And I'm honestly super excited to hear it from Diego. Yay!
Chapter 3, WWE and their negligence. So, exactly whose negligence was it that could have possibly led to this tragedy from happening? Well, let's go over the facts because this is what we know about what happened. On that night, because what they considered a clumsy release the first time they did this type of entrance with him falling from the sky, they were using what they called, and here's the word we were looking for earlier, a locking carabiner. So they were looking into what they would consider a faster and smoother release for the purpose of making the show smoother. So the clip that they were going to use to hold Owen, this new clip they were going to use, was mainly supposed to be used on sailboats. And just hours before showtime at the pay-per-view event, Owen would meet with the riggers, the people who would make his rig, in order to practice his stunt. They asked him, "Hey Owen, you want to do a rehearsal with this new setup?" And at first he said no, and when they told him that it was a new setup, he was like, "All right, let's go ahead and do a practice." So Martha, his wife, is unsure if they actually rehearsed using the new quick release shackle, which we'll show you in a photo.
Right.
They named this guy Bobby Talbert, who was going to be in charge of rigging Owen Hart that night. And his wife, Martha, would say that Bobby should have never been put in charge to secure like the rig that was going to hold up Owen Hart because he had no experience doing that. And so Martha would discover that the rigging people would tell Owen, as long as you don't pull this cord, you'll be okay. And he never did pull the cord.
Can I just say though, like, where did they find this guy?
I don't know. That's a good
saying?
question. Maybe we should have looked into that, but not really sure. They just name him, and the wife is just like, we shouldn't have gotten this guy because he didn't know anything about this stuff.
Right.
And well, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but they had the resources. Obviously, this is the WWF, to get like the highest quality of a rigging crew and to like have put him in the safest situation that he could have been in, but instead they just went with somebody who had never done this before. So negligence.
Bad negligence, right? Because I just feel like we probably should have done research on who this Bobby guy is, but
yeah, all we know is that he didn't know what he was doing, and they trusted him with another man's life at a pay-per-view event. So
big no. Anyways, no. Yeah,
So, of course, we know what happened with the accident, as Ashley was talking about. I mean, he falls, lands in the ring, dies in front of a bunch of people. They still continue the show. I mean, this was absolutely disgusting, like on the WWF's part. So his Owen Hart's wife, Martha, would, and rightfully so, decide to sue Vince McMahon and the WWF. Oh, for sure. For something like that? No.
Yeah.
She decides to sue them for wrongful death. And the lawsuit was issued in Kansas City, which, as we were talking about, is where the accident happened. But this man, Vince McMahon, would try to move the case over to Connecticut, where no punitive damages are awarded. Now, I'm no lawyer, and neither is Ashley.
No.
I mean, I used to work at Golden Corral, but essentially he was trying to save himself from giving the family, or I guess the wife,
like
as much money as she could get.
Yeah.
Which she deserved. I mean, she lost her husband.
And like, even when we define what punitive damages was, we still couldn't.
Let's be real, like, I tried my best, or we both tried our best to define what punitive damages is. I mean, I know what a beam is.
Yeah, no, I mean, we still couldn't figure out, like,
if there's any lawyers out there, comment down below at what a punitive damage is. But let's just, long story short, Vince McMahon was once again trying to cheap out and give her as little money as possible. Ugh. So, and then get this, he then chooses to sue Martha back. I'm not sure for
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
We don't ever find out what the cause
There's probably
was.
a reason out there, but we don't know what the cause
It
is.
probably was like, oh, due to stress.
Or oh, they're trying to libel my name or whatever, or like, you know what I mean, slander.
Slander.
Oh, they're trying to slander my clean
That's
name.
it.
I'm Vince McMahon. Do you know who I am? I tore my quads jumping into a ring one time. Did you ever hear that story?
No.
You guys should look it up. Sorry, side note from the story, but you guys should look up Vince McMahon tears quads jumping into ring.
And wait, he sued somebody?
No. There was this moment in the WWE when Vince McMahon is like marching super angrily down the ring.
As he does, like this.
Yeah, and then he's like screaming at somebody in the ring, and I guess he got overexcited about his like dramatic scenario.
Okay.
That when he jumps into the ring, he just collapses onto the ground, and people thought he was kidding, but he tore his quads, so he couldn't get up.
How do you tear?
He's
tear
old.
quads?
He's old. I don't know. But he literally tore. It was so embarrassing for him because he was just stuck on the ground screaming. You guys should look it up right now.
He should be embarrassed always.
You guys should look it up. It's super funny. He's like stuck. He's stuck on the ground screaming at people. And they're like, "What's going on?" And they thought he was kidding, but nah, he couldn't get up because he tore his quads. Back to the story.
Sorry, we went on a tangent.
So then he chooses to sue Martha for whatever reason, and then he tries to manipulate Owen's family. Gross. He tries to manipulate Owen's family, which, remember, guys, he has a really big family, to saying basically like, look, I'm Vince McMahon. I basically set up your whole family for life. I gave you jobs. I got you fame. I got you money. You guys should side with me instead of with the wife of your brother who died.
Can you imagine that?
And get this, Ashley.
Tell me.
Some people actually chose to side with Vince McMahon and took the side against Martha. So those people are tweaking, man.
Right, because from what we gathered, they were like, oh, let me side with Vince because I know that he can set me up.
Yeah, he can set me up later. Oh, you know what? Yeah, maybe his company may have led to my brother's untimely death, but maybe he'll give me some money later. Gross.
Bye.
So, going back, now we're going to go ahead and talk again about that clip that was trusted with holding up Owen, and we'll show you guys a photo.
Yes.
On the screen. If you're purely listening to us, I would suggest you would turn your screen right now and see how small the clip was, because that thing was tiny. So according to Martha, she would say that clip releases with simply 6 pounds of pressure, and Owen Hart weighed 240 pounds. So any simple movement any form of pressure could have released the clip.
Just doing this.
I mean, 6 pounds is nothing. It's probably just like that, and it just releases. Like, you guys know those keychains that the little clips that you just like.
Yeah.
That's what I'm picturing. So going back to the negligence on the WWF/WWE, they could have chosen to get a proper professional rigging team, but instead of that, they chose to cheap out. To save 2 seconds.
And also, you mentioned something about them not being broke.
Of course not. It's a WWF. They have all the money in the world. Think about all the money that The Rock was bringing in. You may know him from the Fast and the Furious, but at some point The Rock was a wrestler. So I mean, hey, there might be kids that are watching that don't even know where he came from.
Right, and his tagline was like, "Can you smell?
Can you smell what the Rock is?" And he would always raise his eyebrow like this.
Right, and then not only that, you also had Stone Cold Steve Austin, who would come in with 2 beer cans and go.
Yeah, so everyone has a gimmick, right?
Yeah.
Well, anyways.
But they were bringing in tons of money.
Yeah, it's a huge corporation. They had all the money to have set up Owen Wilson.
Oh no, Owen Wilson!
Oh my god.
Wow. Wait, no, I sound like Jennifer Coolidge. Never mind.
Wow. So they could have set up Owen Hart with like the best equipment out there, and instead of doing that, they cheaped out Owen Wilson. So they cheaped out just because they wanted to save a few bucks, and just because the original safer rigging system that he had was clumpy and like clumsy looking. They decided to cheap out again.
Can I
Save
just
2
say
seconds.
I apologize for laughing. This is not a laughing matter. It's
Yeah,
just
no,
that
this isn't funny. It's
I'm
just
so
that
sorry.
Owen Wilson, like, I mean,
he crept into our mind. I apologize if I offended anybody. I'm so sorry. Continue.
of course. So this entire accident, this entire tragic event that occurred back in 1999 in Kansas City could have been completely prevented had the WWF/WWE taken not even like over the top measures, but adequate measures at protecting their athletes. I mean, they had Owen Hart coming down with a quick release clip made for boats
To save 2 seconds.
to save 2 seconds.
Sorry, I just needed to add that.
No, that's true. So eventually in the lawsuit, it came to a settlement, and Martha, Owen Hart's wife, was awarded $18 million, but she would later state that for her, she didn't really care about the money, the settlement money, but she cared more about the WWF taking accountability because they were being negligent, and because of that, she lost her husband. In Bret Hart's autobiography, which is Owen Hart's brother, Vince McMahon would state that Owen's death... Oh, what a gross man. So Vince McMahon would state that Owen's death was the worst thing to ever happen in the business to the nicest guy who ever was in the business. Which is insane to think, hearing it from his mouth, considering he was in charge of the WWF when the accident happened, and instead of stopping the night, which he should have done, he continued with it.
Right, because like you guys have to understand that Vince McMahon is basically like the head honcho at WWF, WWE. If a head booker or storyline creator says, hey, we have this idea, what do you think? He basically has to green light everything.
Right, he's in charge of everything, basically.
in charge
Summer,
of everything.
you're in charge of everything.
Classified Twitter. Write this on the board. Right, so like the fact that it's coming from his mouth, like, oh, we're so sad. That
This is the
happened.
saddest thing that's ever happened in the business. It's like, coming from you, dude, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, like you let this happen. You hired a man who wasn't even licensed. He wasn't a professional. You let the show continue on 15 minutes after somebody died. Like, boy, bye.
His blood was still on the ring, and his fall from the top was so bad that he literally indented the floorboards, and so all the other wrestlers were wrestling there with his blood and the ring having taken damage.
Indent.
Yeah, so it's just crazy. So the WWF would also later try to get Owen Hart inducted into their Hall of Fame, but Martha does not want him to be glorified by the company that took him away from her.
Right.
Took him away from her. He had all the talent in the world. He was a very good wrestler, and he had the fame and the right, like, he was like a star, but she does not want him to be associated with the WWF/WWE in any manner. Ashley, do you have any final thoughts before we go tonight?
I have plenty to say. Basically, what I have to say is that Vince McMahon is the scum of the earth. I'm just kidding. Well,
in some cases,
in some
right?
cases.
Yeah. I don't know him that well. I mean, we don't hang out or anything.
We don't hang out. We never will hang out.
Yeah.
But what I have to say is I don't understand how a man can still resume an event even though one of his employees fell and died. This whole thing could have been prevented if he would have never tried to make fun of the WCW with Sting's entrance, and if he still wanted to go through with it. He could have hired a rigger team that was licensed, a professional, they knew what they were doing. It's little things like that could have totally been prevented.
Yeah.
And like now, Owen Hart's wife does not have her husband. His kids do not have a father. His best friends have lost him. His brother doesn't have his brother anymore. Like, all of this could have been prevented.
Yeah.
And you're gonna honor him? He would have still been here on Monday Night Raw if you hadn't done what you did. But that's all I gotta say. Because I could go on and on forever.
Yeah. So, again, this is like an accident that could have been stopped, and it's just a tragedy to hear stories like this. And that's how I want to close. Thank you guys for sticking around. If you made it all the way through for another episode of Wrapped Up, this is episode 2. Thank you guys for watching. We are going to be here for you every Wednesday giving you guys stories, and it seems like we've become your premier source for WWE stories or WWE related cases. Who knows, maybe episode 3 might be another WWE case.
We promise to switch it up, guys.
Yes. No, we have a lot. We have a story coming up about a Korean girl who killed her boyfriend because she was into true crime and because she wanted to feel what it's like to kill somebody just because of all the true crime stories that she's heard. So that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Or the one that you were telling me about the guy who wanted to copy Dexter.
Oh, so I think you got it backwards. So basically the next story that we're going to tell you guys is a girl in, you said
Korea, right?
Yeah. She was really into true crime, and so she
like
wanted,
us,
and she wanted to know what it was like to kill somebody. So she just picked a random stranger and killed that person.
Oh, so I mixed both. I blended both stories together.
Both stories. Yeah. And then in another story, this guy was like truly obsessed with Dexter. Yeah. And he wanted to. Great show, by the way.
I never saw it. But I know it's great.
I saw the whole thing. Basically, he wanted to know what it was like to be a killer, and because he watched Dexter, he felt like he knew how to dispose of a body and not get found, so he killed his girlfriend.
Oof. Okay, so we have some great ideas coming up on the channel. Yeah. Thank you guys if you made it all the way through again, and we'll see you guys in the next one, episode 3, coming next Wednesday. We'll see you guys later.
Bye. Hope you guys enjoyed and finished your snacks.